The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm your host, Shane Kelly, and I'm joined by my full complement of siblings.
Hey, bro.
Hey, bro. How's it going?
It's all right. It's all right. I am, I've been enjoying playing this game, and happy to talk about it with you today.
Yeah, this is a game that I was really curious about, so we haven't really talked about it on the podcast up to this point, but I finally, in my life, got a gaming PC. So when I was setting up my PC and trying to decide what games to throw on it, I remembered some discussion we'd had about Hardspace Shipbreaker, which the concept really appealed to me, and it seemed kind of fun, so I just started it up and decided to explore it. We don't usually play this kind of game for the show. We're kind of trying to find some new territory for the show. We haven't really played a lot of early access games, and I think that'd be kind of fun to do here. So I definitely have been having a lot of fun with this game, so I'm glad we've made some time to talk about it. We can get into the details of what makes it cool.
Yeah, we're in a bit of a funny place with this game in that, like, we're kind of talking about it just as it's about to stop being a short game, because it is, like we said, early access. And this is one of those early access games that I think is probably fine to jump onto now. Like, I don't think there's
Oh, yeah.
Like, I really do usually feel with early access that, like, well, I'm not going to play through this all again. So, like, why play an unfinished version of it? But this game has a sort of loop that makes it, I think, work in this way.
Yeah, let's talk about what are you breaking when you're in hard shape? Hard shape shapes burst? No.
Hard shape ships burster.
Yes. Hardspace Shipbreaker is a sim game, and that's another genre we don't cover a whole lot on the show. But it's a simulation of being a kind of a first-person perspective dock worker taking apart spaceships in low Earth orbit, that's exactly what got me interested in the game in the first place, because I've never heard a game concept like that. You're armed with a set of different tools, and you exit your little habitat, and you start, making your way towards these increasingly large spaceships, starting with little shuttlecraft all the way up to giant, cargo liners, and that are all, full 3D, and you start just chopping them apart. And you have a work order that allows you to you see these different things on the ship that you're supposed to salvage. And in many cases, that means really carefully disassembling and then just yanking out different parts of this ship, and then either putting them onto a giant barge that kind of adjoins your salvage area, or if it's scrap metal or scrap nanocarbon, throwing them into a couple of different processors that you have. So the game has a really great gameplay loop. Like I said, you're equipped with these different gadgets that you can use. One of them, probably the most fun, most interesting one, is a tether tool that you can use to pull yourself or to pull scrap around. And you can either do that by tethering onto things and just retracting the tether and kind of yanking yourself to move really quickly, or by deploying these kind of energy tethers that are like a double-ended string that's going to have a really strong pulling force, and you can kind of double these up to get even more pulling force, yanking pieces off of the ship. And then the second piece of equipment is a laser cutter, and that laser cutter has a couple of modes. There's a kind of a pinpoint laser soldering tool that you can use to melt different parts of the ship. And there's also a kind of line cutter. You can kind of spread the beam out and cut kind of swaths across kind of panels and things like that. The third tool, and one you don't unlock for quite a while in the game if you're playing the career mode, are demolition charges that you can use to kind of blast bits apart.
So I think what we should take a second and sort of explain a little bit more about is like the how the ships work, because I think what surprised me most about this game, like I understood like, okay, this is a game that sort of functions.
The ships are procedurally generated, which is one of the things that's really interesting.
The thing that surprised me here is that the ships are really fully 3D realized. This is a game about, cutting apart ships, and it has this sort of puzzle-like element where like each of these ships has this sort of intricate way of being constructed out of various different materials and pieces. They might have like an outer shell and an inner shell for pressurization. They, and those are connected with various different sorts of little metal spars, and they have different like attachment points on them. And then inside the ship there's all sorts of different stuff, so you might have different modules. There's furniture inside the ships. There's units to control the environment. There's engines. There's power systems. The ships are remarkably fully realized in intricate 3D detail, and they're complex enough that it's kind of surprising how easy, well, not easy, because some of these are quite, they become these little puzzles, but like how very completely you can disassemble them. So there's a lot of different, Shane mentioned all these different tools that you use, but you're using those in a bunch of different ways. And this game felt a lot like a sort of verging on a puzzle game for me, because each of these ships is a kind of a little like sealed puzzle box that just sort of looks like a, undifferentiated gray rectangle with protrusions from the outside. But once you start scanning it with your 3D scanner, you start realizing like, okay, this thing has these multiple different parts. They're attached here. And then you are flying around and inside of these ships, these massive ships in 3 dimensions, and finding the best approach to pop the seal on their environment, on their pressurization, so they depressurize, to cut apart the hull, maybe detach the important pieces of the hull from the interior parts so that you can open the ship up and retrieve important parts from the interior of the ship. Maybe even finding ideal routes. So like some of these things like that you want to get out of the ship to salvage are actually very dangerous. Things like fuel cells or nuclear reactors that you need to store safely and quickly. And so there's things like, how do I get the reactor out of the ship and onto my supply barge without killing myself? And it's like that kind of stuff that like really makes this like it really kind of straddles this line between sim and puzzle game. And I have never played anything like this before. Like I've played other sim games, but like this is simulating something and hitting a real good point where like simulation games can sometimes be like ultra complicated or like ultra like figurative. I don't know if that's the right word. They can really simplify things into just like very sort of like wireframey versions of them. This really walks a line where like this feels realistic-ish, but also always sort of feels like you kind of have this ability to understand this system. It's really, really cool in my opinion.
Yeah, part of the way they simplify that is through the kind of design of the ships, which I think procedurally generated is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, if that, at least if I were hearing that term.
Yeah, I think they're just
classes.
Procedurally generating things like where are the various units within the ship,
right,
and like what sort of cargo are they carrying, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And every ship has different classes. So there are different classes of ship that represent like the size and complexity of the ship. And you start off with really simple shuttlecraft. But even just that most basic shuttlecraft, you're going to see different loadouts for it. Some of them are station hopper ships that are kind of easy to break into, but a lot of little pressurized areas, a lot of furniture inside. Inside of those ships, you find a lot of things like tanks of spare oxygen that actually make taking them apart really easy, because one of the things you're managing in this game is a bunch of resources like your oxygen and the wear and tear on your gear and things like that. Or the number of these energy tethers that you carry. And that's one of the things that, at least in the current version of the game, are a big part of the progression. But other loadouts for the ships would include things like a more cargo-oriented version of it, or one that's a fuel tanker that is full of big canisters of fuel. And every one of these presents kind of different challenges. As you get to the bigger ships, especially, that have a lot of weird crawl spaces that you have to make your way around in order to get to it, you're in a lot of danger. And this game, because this is a game with lots of different ways to die. Let's see, you can die by forgetting to refill your oxygen tanks. You can die by accidentally setting yourself on fire by overheating your cutter. There's lots of ways to die with the cutter. You can depressurize a portion of the ship that then sucks you into a wall, or blasts you into a hard object. You can cut any number of different hazardous elements, like the reactor, the coolant tanks, the energy setup. The big one is the fuel tanks. If you cut those, and if you do that,
boom.
One of the things that I really love about this is you're right back, because we haven't mentioned the kind of world that this game is setting up, the premise. But you are going to be revived as a clone right away and be charged $150,000 for the privilege. Because let me detour for a minute about the premise of the game. This is set in a distant future Earth, and we are playing a version of the game that is before the story campaign has been introduced. That's coming apparently in the next version of the game. They've announced it. It's coming quite soon. But this is, March of 2021, and we haven't yet got that version yet. So, but the world of the game is made clear through a lot of little ways, little text things that you can find in the menus and things like that. So this is a distant future. Humanity has moved out to the solar system. Earth is kind of a backwater, and that is also kind of characterized in, and there's hints of all sorts of things in the logs that you find. One of my favorite things about the way they're doling out those logs right now is there's little data drives that are you can pick up from inside the ships in the pressurized areas, and you can find you can decrypt people's emails and stuff like that. But yeah, humanity has moved out from Earth. Earth is kind of the backwater, and the Lynx Corporation has basically set up shop in low Earth orbit around Earth, because low Earth orbit around Earth is already a junkyard. It's that kind of the Kepler disorder, like you see in the movie Gravity, where the low Earth orbit is just nothing but space junk hitting more space junk, making tinier and more deadly pieces of space junk. There's even a little log that talks about how dangerous it is to come out of the Earth gravity well. They just recommend it's a crapshoot to come up from Earth. The transport ships are blasted by space junk all the time. So just get high and sleep through it. You'll either die in your sleep, or you'll make it to Earth orbit, which you, the cutter, have done. And you've made it to low Earth orbit. You have signed a contract with Lynx that means they now own your DNA and can reconstitute you at will. And they are paying you in scrip and company Lynx tokens, which can be exchanged to keep your basic tools of your work in order and do some upgrades to things like your cutter's range. And that's the game. You are starting off $1 billion in debt, and you can only pay that money down by cutting apart these ships. But also make sure you're doing it fast, because you're paying rent on all of the equipment. You're paying rent, and you're buying your oxygen. You're paying rent on the cutter. You're paying rent on your spacesuit. You're paying a fee every time you start a shift. So
capitalist
you better get to work, and you better. It really is, and I absolutely love that aspect of the premise. This is another thing that I think really pulled me into the game. What stuck me with the game, and I've played about 25 hours of this game now, is the loop being so good. But the story, to me, feels extremely ripe for there's a lot of stuff that I think they could do with the story and the world of this game. I really like the idea of a kind of a blue-collar space construction / deconstruction sim. That it really appeals to me. In fact, if there's one game that this game reminds me of the most, it's Outer Wilds. And it's not super similar, but what it does, the reason that I compare it there is that it has this rustic science fiction element to it, right? So there's two ways that they're similar. One is they're both games where there's this kind of simulation-y element and kind of a puzzle element working together, and that both involve maneuvering around a lot in 3D 0G space. So there's that, at least. But there's also this kind of rustic tone to it. So when you have these sci-fi settings, what you're often not getting is banjo music, and that is something that you get in both of these. So I think there's
that.
Yeah, so I to me it had some of that DNA, and I really like that. That's a thing that really works for me. Having this kind of blue collar energy to your space sim is something that is a real choice, and for me really, really works. There are some things about the tone of the game once you start digging through all the logs. Like, not all of it was firing on all cylinders, in my opinion, but enough of it was that I really like the world of this game, and I'm looking forward to when they bring out the story. The Act 1 of the story is coming in the next update, they say. So, yeah, I mean, I think I've said a lot about it, I guess. We could start getting into some of the stuff like tips for cutting the ships apart, or we could talk about the different classes of ship, or all the ways to die that I haven't talked about yet.
I think it's worth talking a little bit more about what specifically you're doing when you're taking these ships apart, because you're kind of you're playing. The ships are in this sort of ring, and on the periphery of the ring, there's these sort of furnaces. So there's one special furnace that's like what do they call these ones again?
There are basically 3 kinds of material that you're collecting, and each of them goes to a different place. The most valuable material is stuff that goes on the barge, and that is when you get a tooltip on it, it's green. That's things like computers, airlocks, things that are heavily mechanical or electrical, especially things like the reactor.
Also stuff like furniture.
Yeah, furniture, real finished goods kind of stuff goes in there. And that stuff, a lot of it is really easy to pull out. Like, you just grab it with you can grab the computer, or on the outside of the ship, there'll be things like antennas. And you can grab those and just pull them off and just throw them in the barge. And the barge is huge. It takes up one full side of your working area. On 2 adjacent sides, each of those 2 sides has both a processor and a furnace. And the processor is the place where you dump nanocarbon, and that is the second highest by, just kind of by value by volume. That's a lot of your panels from the outside of the ship are nanocarbon. A lot of the big panels or big chunks of the ship are that. And then there's also the lowest value is stuff you would throw in the furnace, and that's going to be metal. And that'll be things like, some of the panels are metal, like aluminum, or a lot of the struts that make up the structure of the ships are titanium, and that's the stuff that you throw in the furnace. You get the insides, you get the guts of the ship exposed, and you just start hauling out all the pieces that you want and just checking off things on the work order. And the most important thing in this game is to be checking off the items on the work order. When you check off items on the work order, that's giving you the script currency of the game. And that's how you start upgrading your gear. So that's really the main currency. The dollars, the quote-unquote real money in the game, yeah, you don't really play with that much. You get more money the more of the ship you take apart, and but you're also constantly being taxed, and you're making money at a very slow rate. I think I started $1 billion in debt, and I think over the course of the game I made about $100,000. So
good luck.
Yeah, I'm still like $900 million in debt. Maybe I don't even need to be explaining the system of like upgrades and stuff progress to you, because in the version that you may be playing, if you're playing this after the 0.4 update, all of that progress is going to be reset, and apparently they're giving us a new progression system. So this is a game I'm planning to come back. This is just why we don't often cover early access games, because here I am talking to our audience, and if I convince you to play this game, it may have nothing to do with what I'm saying right now. But
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing about it. Like, I am excited to see where this goes, because I think it has a lot of I think they've really nailed the basic mechanic that this game revolves around. The idea of like, okay, go in here and take this ship apart, and presenting you with like increasing difficulty in that task. And the tools they've given you feel really good. The movement is fairly interesting. It feels like truly like unfettered 3D, 0G movement. And I think they've really nailed that core. What they're working on now is adding a story, and we don't really know what that's going to be like. And I think that's where this game is going to sort of like live and die in terms of like a more general release. I can see a lot of really exciting directions they could take for a story mode for this game. I was constantly thinking of like, wow, it would be really cool if it did X or Y. And like none of those things happened in this very sort of wireframey version that's the early access version. I was thinking to myself like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I found a stowaway, or if one of these ships was like, like where are the warships? I haven't taken apart a warship. Right. Or like have more environmental storytelling happening within the ships. Something surprising or dramatic that you find in one of these dead ships would go a long way, rather than just having you find like tapes.
There are a lot of really good ideas here already that hint at that, and so I am very optimistic for that. First off, I think the writing that does exist in the game is good. Where you're finding that writing is mainly in things like there's these like data drives that you find often kind of floating around the interior of the ships. But in one case, we found one taped to the outside of the habitat that you stay in.
Yeah,
maybe by a previous Shipbreaker. That was kind of cool. But they're not really telling a story with those yet. They're really just doing world building. I also really have a lot of things I would love to see in this. I think there's a lot of room to tell an interesting kind of anti-corporate story, and they're already kind of playing with those ideas a lot in what they've written. But there's not much difference between disassembling a ship and sabotaging a ship, right?
Yeah.
So there's I think a lot of opportunity to use the mechanics and design that they already have in that way. We haven't talked much about what you actually see around the shipyard that you're working in. If you look up, there's a kind of they call it like a rail station, and it lights up every now and then. It seems like some kind of faster than light portal gate, and there's like materials and cargo coming in and out of it. One of the things you find on one of those data drives is like a diagram of one of them that like talks about the parts of it, and it looks like it's got a lot of stuff to load in and out. The guy that you talk to, there's like I'm a sucker for a narrator with a nice southern drawl, and they have one of those kind of talking you through some of the elements of the game, like how to use your equipment. And the first time the rail gate goes off, he's referring. He says like I never get tired of seeing those. Maybe one day it'll be you heading out there, you know? Like, because your goal, your stated goal, I guess, in the game is to escape Earth and get away and go live somewhere that's not so shitty. And you're not, maybe after you pay off $1 billion in debt. I would really like to see this lean into that kind of anti-corporate vibe. You see all this cargo coming up. There's like a space elevator that seems to kind of be maybe taking away the stuff that you've reclaimed off of the ships. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on there. It's like but there's tons and tons of cargo like moving very near you. And if you try and go over near it, the company kills you by I don't know, like literally just you die and they tell you you voided your contract by leaving your work area. I guess they like cut your oxygen or something. So that's like just one more way to die in this game. I would love to fuck with this company. They're setting up a corporation I would absolutely love to get my vengeance on. And I think, you know, a laser cutter is a great tool for that vengeance. So I like the opportunities that are presented here. And if they can just use the tools that they have built and integrate them into a story in a good way, like I think they've got something here. I think they're going to have a fun game. So
yeah, and I think we're going to see more of that pretty soon with the like, you know, so the story mode they say is something like 15 hours of content. Now I think that might be.
So that's already not a short game.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. I suspect that, you know, this is the kind of thing where, like, you know, I think there's an incentive, especially with games in early access, to, you know, dress up the amount of content that they have. This game launched, like when I first played this game, it was pretty soon after launch, and there were 2 ships available at the time, you know, and it's been, what, like 6 months since that? And they've added a bunch more.
No, the game launched in early access last summer of 2020, and like June or July.
Oh God, it's been more than 6 months since then. Time. What is time? Anyway, you know what I mean. It is you know, less than a year, but they've added a lot of additional like just like game content to it. Things like additional ships and different varieties of ships, and they've like done even just sort of basic stuff like adding that hyperspace gate that you can like look up and see. You know, they've added like environmental details like that. And obviously in the background, they've been working on story content that they're going to be releasing in part soon. That's really exciting to see. And I think that's really when we're going to see what kind of game this is going to be, apart from being like a really interesting set of puzzle-like mechanics. So I've really been enjoying this game. I've gone back to it several times since initially picking it up, and it was fun to go back to it yet again and find that, like, oh, hey, there's still new stuff here. But like once the actual story mode drops, I think we're going to see like what are they really trying for like a final game experience here. That said, like I would have never really thought of myself, like I really usually avoid early access games in general. Like my usual approach to early access is like, if a game's in early access, typically that means that there is some version of its story mode, but it needs work or needs additional like chapters or polish or what have you. But what this has been up to now is like, here is just the game part and the story is coming later. And that's actually been, I think, a really good approach, because like the bones here are incredibly fun. I continue to have fun just booting this up to do a shift. And the fact that it will have a story, like I think this almost doesn't need a story. It's like a cool Zen experience just to sort of boot it up and take apart a spaceship. And the fact that it will have a story is great, but like it's been a different experience for me than most early access, where like I kind of always sort of feel like why am I playing this version of the game when I could come back later and get a better version of the same experience, and I won't want to repeat the experience. But because this is like has mostly been me engaging with sort of this like, you know, storyless version of this set of mechanics, and that has already been really compelling, I'm into it. Like the early access part of it has not bothered me, or I still felt it was worthwhile as an experience.
What story they have, that it's kind of the light dusting, but it's very resonant. What it really reminds me the most of, I'm making a lot of analogies here, but do you remember that this was in a news article a little while back, but Elon Musk was talking about how he's going to colonize Mars. And he said he would have loans available for people who don't have the money to fly to Mars, and that they could then have jobs on the red planet where these colonists could pay off their debt.
Oh, my word.
So, yeah, like this sort of interplanetary indentured servitude is something that could exist in the not too distant future. So this is. This is
a business model that literally did exist in like the 1600s, right? Like ship those people.
You don't have to go that far back.
No, not even. Yeah, and ship these people off to the New World or Australia or whatever, and make them work on your dirt farm for a nickel a week until they've paid off their fare, right? It's
or you look at mining towns,
literal nightmare
in like early. You don't have to look that far back to find mining towns where you're getting paid in scrip, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically what they're setting up here. I think it's very, very evocative what they've created, and the fact that I'm so fascinated with the world of this game. Even before there's like basically any story for me to play, I think is a very good sign. Hopefully they don't screw the pooch on this and just drop a story that's absolute garbo.
Turns out the story is racist. Oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah, it could happen.
No.
But
Yeah, no.
I don't know. It seems like they're really on the right track here. I'm very excited to see where it goes. But I guess the point I was trying to make earlier is like with most early access games, I don't feel comfortable putting them on the show in this kind of format because I feel like I'm saying like, hey, invest in this product that may or may not offer you a return on your dollar, right? But like I really feel I paid $20 for this at the start of early access. They've since increased the price to $25, but like this is so worth $25, even if it existed only in its exact current form permanently.
Yeah. If the version that they have now, like with all the ships, there's so many ships in it now. If the version that we have now was like the game, I would be happy with it. I'm interested to see the story. But maybe the story I'm inventing in my head is better. I don't know.
Yeah. Same, honestly. Like I've definitely had like, a lot of like thinking about like, oh, like how would I do the story mode for Hardspace Shipbreaker?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's going to be fine, but like, and it's probably not going to be like the story of the year or anything. I mean, not that I don't know. Maybe they're really cooking something special. I don't know. But like, it doesn't have to be. The mechanics here are the focus for me. And it's just a really fun thing to do, flying around in 3D and disassembling intricate things. It gives you this sense of like mastery that is like it's really cool. And I said this earlier, but like it really does a great job of straddling a line between being extremely like realistic simulation-y and also like wireframe puzzle-y. Like it really walks a line between those two.
Yeah, and I like the way they tutorialize. I didn't really talk about that. I don't always love the way tutorials work in games, but here, like, I did mention the lovely Southern gentleman who is telling you, well, listen, Cutter, tethers are your friends.
Yeah, that dude. I think if I have one complaint about this game, and I don't think this is really solvable because it's a difficult problem, but like I definitely had a lot of trouble, especially early on, but even after many hours of the game, I had a hard time with just moving around. This is a game about moving through three-dimensional space, and one aspect of that they're trying to keep fairly, simulation-y is acceleration. It's very dangerous in space that there are no brakes on your movement. You're not moving through air where there's resistance. If you get going up to a certain speed, you are going, and you are going to hit something fly out into space and hurt yourself. And that's very possible here. And also, of course, this being 0G, you can be oriented in any direction. So if you're used to first-person shooters, you're very used to doing things like circle strafing around or like, jumping or what have you. But like, imagine there is no up and down, and you can get turned on any axis, and it can get kind of hard to orient yourself. So like, I want to approach a ship and cut a very small cut point on the upper corner of a part of a ship. Well, I have to, first of all, point myself at the ship, then perhaps spin forward or backward in order to make sure that I'm actually pointed at the ship on that axis, so that when I move, I'm not going to like overshoot in one way or the other. I also need to make sure that I'm rotated to a direction that will be approaching the ship at an angle where I'll be able to actually see the thing that I'm cutting. And then when I move towards the ship, I need to be able to move towards it and then, brake and stop before hitting it at high speed. Just moving around in that totally fully 3D, no up, no down kind of way can get really confusing. If you're inside a ship, especially where the floors and the ceilings look a lot alike, it can be really difficult to navigate. You might lose your way. And I found that sometimes a little frustrating.
That challenge I really liked. So one thing that's worth mentioning about this is you do have a lot of control over yourself and your movement. Like, the movement controls are quite complicated. You've got I played with a keyboard.
Yeah, and I played with a controller.
Your usual controls move you forward, back, left, and right. But Q and E were assigned to rotating you clockwise or counterclockwise. And if you pressed both of those, that triggered the brake. That basically put a brake on your movement. And that's something you're using all the time in this game. There's also another weird way to get around, which is you have gloves that are like... in the item description, it says they have the like Van der Waal effect, like a gecko, right? So they like stick to things. You have sticky gloves. And so you can kind of walk around on the surface of the ship with your hands. And you do that with Z and X on the keyboard. Like you can literally walk by doing like left, right, left, right, left, right with your hands. And then there's also a lot of things like, the airlock controls and things like that you're using with your hands. So like walking around the insides or outsides of the ship is another way to get around. But yeah, that's a lot of different controls. It's also like space and shift to like make you go up or down. So there's a lot. You can also like rocket. Once you get good with that stuff, you can rocket yourself around using the grapple. That the grappling gun isn't good. Also, isn't just for like moving parts of the ship around or using the tethers. You can also use it to pull yourself and get really, really fast. But that is yet another way to kill yourself. Because if you start pulling yourself really fast and you slam into something, you will shatter your helmet and your oxygen will run out instantly. And then you'll die slowly and painfully, but you won't make any sound because space. So, yeah. So, I take what you say about the movement in this game. The movement is complex, but that is also part of the appeal of the game to me. Like that's another way I think it's very similar to the Outer Wilds, where like just getting around is kind of a challenge, and surmounting that challenge is part of the fun.
Yeah, I found this like I've really sort of eventually wrapped my head around the kind of strange ship movement mechanics in Outer Wilds. It had that similar like this is 3-dimensional 0G space kind of thing, but like it had an autopilot, for example. This has no autopilot, and I found myself never quite getting to the level of like feeling super comfortable and fluid floating around. I always sort of felt in this like I was like, getting like 80% to where I wanted to be, and then kind of like flailing until I could do what I wanted to do. So the movement never felt like really like I never felt like mastery over it. And I tried both keyboard and gamepad controls. Gamepad controls worked a little better for me, because things like having the like rotation be on things like the triggers really kind of made sense. And in a way that like the like go up and go down controls being on what sort of traditionally would feel like a jump and duck button kind of the way things are mapped kind of made sense to me brain wise, but like it was still really frustrating to be like, I want to cut this thing, and like it's right there, I can see it, but I can't point myself at it. Like that's really frustrating when you're like, I just want to aim, no, that way, that way. It's a little weird. But like, I don't know, it is definitely like part of it, you know, it's really trying to simulate that like actual 3-dimensional 0G movement, and it mostly succeeds at that. And the things that I found frustrating are probably just sort of part of the experience. So, and you know, it's still pretty cool. So, I think there's not much else to say about Hardspace Shipbreaker, other than maybe we'll check back in once the story mode's out. But it's currently available on Steam in early access. I believe it's Windows only at this point. Let me see if that's true. Yes, it is Windows only. So Steam for Windows. They have plans to bring it out on consoles, but only once the game exits early access. And that's, I think, been like the standard model lately, is like exiting early access and coming to consoles is like simultaneously is like the move now, after Hades made such a big splash with that specific, approach. But like, I'm really excited to see this reach a broader audience with consoles. So maybe we'll revisit it once that happens.
Yeah, and with a little time here at the end, do you want to talk about what's making us happy this week?
Sure. You got anything?
Yeah, hang on. Let me try and summon some will to live.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a toss-up. Two things are really making me happy. One is I almost have my living room and downstairs almost totally remodeled. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have walls in your house that you don't like, get rid of them. That's my advice. I'm getting rid of a whole wall, opening up the wall between my dining room and my living room, and I'm really excited for the way it makes my downstairs look. So this is exciting to me. Other things that are making me happy this week, I'm really hyped for Monster Hunter Monster Hunter Rise. That's the new one. A bunch of my friends are playing it. I just downloaded it. I'm getting started with it, so that's making me happy. I have so many. Time Spiral Remastered in Magic the Gathering came out last week. Or maybe maybe a couple weeks ago, losing track of time. This is a reprint or a rehash of a Magic set or block of sets that came out in 2006 when I was not playing. And they have brought it out, and it was full of all these like time-shifted cards where they like reprinted like popular cards, but with the old Magic border that reminds me of my childhood. Nostalgia. So wonderful, so painful, so expensive to try and chase all these cards. And I don't know. It's been a weird week because I've just been all over the place. I've been really busy with work, so I have a lot of little things making me happy, but mostly it's just stuff like I ordered a pizza.
Doesn't that always make you happy? God, I love ordering a pizza.
Almost. Sometimes it makes me kind of depressed.
Okay, yeah, there is that hazard. It kind of depends on the context, right? If you're ordering a pizza, but you're like, I'm going to put my feet up and order a pizza and treat myself to something delicious, then great. But if you're ordering a pizza because you're like, I have no food in my house, and I'm ordering a pizza because it's the only way I can eat, then that is, in fact, not great.
It was a bit of both, but damn, you know what? Oh, here's the tip, hot tip for you guys who are listening. If you do the like Pizza Hut, I'm a Pizza Hut man. But you can get stuffed crust, and you can get it like they could put like a garlic butter wash on it, and you can have them put like shredded cheese on the crust, and now the crust is better than the pizza.
Ooh, that sounds pretty good. What's your standard pizza order,
really
Shane?
good. My usual pizza order is a pepperoni pizza large, and then I just have them just do it up on the crusts. That's what I usually do.
Yeah. I have been cheap over the last few years where I like to do the 2 large pizzas for I don't even remember how much you spend, but I get some real basic ass pizzas, but I get big pizzas, but I don't go for the fancy here's a meat lovers or whatever, where they've assembled a pizza for you, curated with a lot of custom ingredients. I'm give me the basic 2-topping pizza, right? Where there's a coupon, that's my whole deal. So then I throw stuff on top of it. So I'll get a basic pepperoni pizza and then I add hot sauce or that kind of thing. And that's my approach, is send me a reasonably priced pizza and let me add some stuff on top. Add the red pepper flakes and cheeses, and I look through my pantry and see if I've got anything that's worth throwing on
get
top
the
of that
chili
pizza.
crisp. That's the thing. When we're talking about putting stuff on top of pizza, chili crisp.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Did you get some yet? I told you a while ago, go get yourself some chili crisp. I literally just had some on eggs. That's my if I'm alone, which is rare, but if I'm by myself lately and I'm trying to make a meal, I just fry an egg and put chili crisp on it and put it on toast, ideally with some avocado, and then I just live it up.
Nice, you millennial.
That's how you know I'm rich, because I have a house and avocado toast.
I have no segue for that, but I can tell you a little bit about one thing that's been making me happy this week. That's by way of a recommendation. I've been playing a lot of Capcom beat 'em ups recently. I had, when we covered Streets of Rage 4, it kind of reignited why haven't I been playing beat 'em ups more? In my brain. And so I've been playing a lot more retro beat 'em ups over the last little while. And I've mentioned on the show before that I'm into and really enjoy the Mister project, which is a sort of FPGA based, retro game hardware thing. And
what is it? I don't think you've ever talked about that to me before.
I've definitely talked your ear off about it, and I'm sure I'm on the record.
You gave me one. It's awesome.
Yeah, actually, I have a. I'm not sure if it'll be out by the time this episode comes out, but I just recorded a guest episode on the Pocketoid podcast. One of their hosts is a big retro gaming nerd, and basically spent an hour nerding out with him about the Mister project. And I think they're going to be releasing that sometime in the next week or two. So I'll point people that direction when that's out, if you want to hear me really nerd out about that. But specifically, what I've been playing on that is a bunch of Capcom beat 'em ups. Capcom had a really good run of beat 'em ups in the 90s and a little later. The one that really specifically was brand new to me and I really, really enjoy is The Punisher. Capcom had a problem, I think, where they did a lot of really great beat 'em ups, but most of their best ones were licensed games that they can't easily re-release. So last year they came out with that Capcom beat 'em ups collection on Switch and a bunch of other platforms, and it has some good stuff, but it only has the stuff that Capcom has their own rights to. So that had Final Fight, obvious classic, but that was sort of early. Captain Commando, The King of Dragons, Knights of the Round, and a couple of other things, I think. And those are pretty good games. But where Capcom really started hitting their stride with beat 'em ups was when they started doing these later games that were mostly licensed titles. And something like The Punisher, they licensed it from Marvel, or Alien versus Predator, which is a double license because it's, the Alien franchise and the Predator movies. Both of those are incredible beat 'em ups that have really amazing sprites and they're just absolutely a blast to play. The Predator was brand new to me. I played Alien versus Predator a number of times, but the Punisher game is really, really solid. Like it's got good encounters. You can play as obviously the Punisher, or you can also play as Nick Cage, who apparently is part of that series. And it's just the most of the enemies have guns,
like Nicolas Cage, the actor.
Oh, did I say Nick? I meant Nick Fury. Excuse me.
Nick Fury. Okay.
Excuse me.
I was about to say I'm in.
I meant Nick Fury from the Marvel films, but not that Nick Fury. You know, the like comic book Nick Fury, the like grizzled white guy, like war vet, eye patch man.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Sorry,
not Nicolas Cage.
man,
That would have been honestly much better if Nicolas Cage was in there, but he's not.
How many video games actually feature Nicolas Cage? Because there's got to be some video game adaptation of some movie he's been in, right?
I bet so. Was there a Ghost Rider video game? There should have been. Is there?
Oh, no. He only has 3 video game credits on his IMDb. And there's a game called WildStar and a game called Swords and Soldiers.
Well, those both sound like they lit the world on fire.
Yeah. Why? He seems like the kind of guy who will do literally anything for a check. How does he not have more video game credits?
I don't know, man. Maybe the fact that he's probably not a particularly good voice actor is a factor. Like, he really, like, Nicolas Cage works because of his face, which is very strange.
It's not even, though.
Well, no, he's a master of like the weird expression.
He really is.
I personally think Nicolas Cage is actually really, really great and sometimes underappreciated. I think he's one of our greatest B-movie actors of all time. And I think sometimes when he's in the right role, he's actually really fantastic. I always tell people that, like, if you want to understand Nicolas Cage, you watch what's that movie called? Moonlighting? No, not Moonlighting. That's a TV series with, what am I thinking?
Face Off? That's the one I would recommend. National Treasure.
What's that film? Moonstruck. Moonstruck is amazing. And that was when he was young, and like he just like acts the hell out of that. And you can see his like weirdness is there, but it kind of works because the character is supposed to be this sort of off guy. He's fantastic in it, and he's acting with Cher, and Cher is great in it. But like also,
I think I got to see that.
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
Lately, he's been in some really good movies that I'm a kind of a horror nut, and in the 2010s, he's been in both Mandy and The Color Out of Space. And those are really
Bringing
good.
Out the Dead was also fantastic. That was a movie he did with... It was a Martin Scorsese movie that, like, I think it's like... People think of it as like a lesser Scorsese.
Games.
But like it's a killer movie.
If he's not doing games, we shouldn't be doing games.
Oh, and what was...
we should just make this a full-time Cage cast.
Yeah, I would 100% do a Nicolas Cage cast. I wonder if there is one. There probably is, right? There's probably a Nicolas Cage movie podcast that's probably already completed its run, but oh god. Oh, and Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, one of the greatest films of all time. My god, that movie's amazing. I don't even want to get into it here. Oh god,
he's got a lot of real bad movies though.
Oh man, it would be a real slog to do a movie podcast about Nicolas Cage's oeuvre. It would take real determination. Anyway, Capcom beat-em-ups are fun. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find our various contact options. We got a contact form. You can write to us there. You can write to us on Twitter at _shortgame, or you can support the show on Patreon, and that gets you access to our Discord community, where you can talk to us about Nicolas Cage. And let us know what you think about Nicolas Cage. And you can support the show for even $1 a month.
Yeah, if you liked this extra rambly What's Making Us Happy, try us on the Discord, where we're even worse.
Yeah, or if you like this extra rambly version of the show, maybe hope for more episodes where it's just Shane and me. because that's what we get up to. You can find me personally on Twitter at Raygan K. That's Raygank, and you can find Shane on Twitter at
8-Bit Shane.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.